Hey, everybody. I hope this is working. This is my first time doing a live stream. So I am a little nervous to make sure that it is coming through on YouTube. So I am checking that out real quick to make sure. So if it is working and you are watching me look at my phone, bear with me. All right, we are good to go. So, welcome to Tales of the Force. I have this podcast is just a place for people to tell their Star Wars stories and where anybody can come. And this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so, as some of you know that have been listening to the podcast, I've had different fans come on and share their different stories of mental health and how that also has just kind of gone with Star Wars or how Star Wars has helped them through different things. So if any of you haven't checked those out, they're really good. They're a little bit longer than the normal episode time, but that's just kind of because there's a lot more to talk about. So today I have two amazing experts in the mental health field that are going to be joining me. And I'm so excited because they also love Star Wars. And so we're going to talk about obviously, a little bit about how they got into Star Wars and what they love about it, but then also how Star Wars was really influenced by psychology, and also how Star Wars can help you as we go through different things in our life. So, we have two guests that are coming on to join us. And the first one is Dr. Lourah Kelly, and she is a clinical researcher who has loved Star Wars since she was a teenager. She studies technology based interventions for young people with co occurring mental health and substance use issues. She has a PhD in clinical psychology and is a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Connecticut. She loves that friendship among women, finding balance, and facing the darkness are prominent themes in Star Wars. The story of Finn being programmed to be a stormtrooper and yet deciding to lead the resistance is a really powerful story to her. She believes that this shows we can all learn to be different, no matter how we might have been taught. Leia and Padme have also been some of the most inspiring characters for her. She hopes that people are inspired by Star Wars to bring balance to their lives and keep fighting. Our other guest is Ashton Kleekamp. She actually hasn't always loved Star Wars. She even prided herself on never watching them until 2019. And a trip to the Galaxy's Edge while she was at I can't talk today. Sorry, guys. I'm a little nervous. I haven't done a live stream before, but we'll be good. We'll get through it. A trip to Galaxy's Edge while at Disney World is what got her hooked. She went from there and ended up watching all the movies. And while she loves them all the movies and shows, the sequels are really what got her into the fandom. She now especially loves the prequel era, and her favorite characters are Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano. Ashton is a mental health worker and advocate. She has a master's in counseling and guidance, and she has been a licensed professional counselor in Kansas, and she's working towards also having her license in Tennessee. She is very open with her struggles with chronic illness and depression. Ashton loves to use fandoms to help connect with the youth that she works with. So, everybody, please join me in welcoming Lourah and Ashton to Tales of the Force. And we have Lourah. And we have Ashton. How are you guys?
Hi.
Great.
Doing great.
Good. I fumbled through that a little bit, but it's okay. So, each of you tell us a little bit about how you got into Star Wars.
Ashton, you can go first.
Sure. I will be very honest with you. I have not always been a Star Wars fan. I was a Disney fan first. I think I watched episode 3 halfway through one time
Mm-hmm.
before Galaxy's Edge opened. So I had been a pass holder at Disney World, and Galaxy's Edge was getting ready to open, and I just happened to like have the opportunity to be there for opening weekend. And so I told myself I have got to watch Star Wars so I can appreciate this more, and like understand what is going on. So yeah, I just like dove straight into the movies, really enjoyed them. I would say, I really enjoyed the prequels at the time. The sequels are really what got me into it, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were newer, they weren't all out. Um, I really honestly enjoyed Kylo Ren's like struggle with light and dark.
Yeah.
Um, and that made me dive into the TV shows, and Clone Wars is what made me fall in love with Star Wars. So, um, yeah, just watching through Clone Wars, falling in love with Anakin, falling in love with Ahsoka, and just watching and reading everything I can since then. And it's literally it's history since Clone Wars for me.
I love it. I love it. And Ashton, I don't know if I told you, I think we kind of talked about this a little bit on social media at one point, but um you were at MegaCon this
Hmm.
year, which Laura's sister was there with me.
Oh, fun.
And so we were there, and I was at the Clone Wars panel that you
Hmm.
were there as well. And I know that you got to ask a question as one of
Yes.
the audience members. And I don't think I've told you this. I think I told you that I was there and that sort of thing. But you asking your question and sharing some of your story and different things that you talked about really helped inspire me to go in this direction for the podcast. So initially, and I've talked about this before, I thought about doing a Star Wars podcast about the books because
Mm,
as someone who has ADHD, sometimes it's really hard for me to remember what I have to do during
yeah.
the day and then to focus on that thing. And so I read a lot as a kid, but have
Hmm.
really got out of the habit as an adult. And so I thought, well, if I do a podcast about the books, then maybe that will give me some kind of, I don't know, just extra accountability to actually do it. And so I was thinking about doing that. But then I just kept dragging my feet and dragging my feet. And I had a friend tell me, doing this you can burn out at some point, especially if it's
Hmm.
something that you're not super passionate about. And if you're dragging your feet already and you haven't even started it, that might not be the best topic for you to do. Not that the books, I'm not passionate about them and I don't love them, but that was kind of some advice that I was given. And then through going to MegaCon and talking to people and even just people online and learning their stories and hearing what you shared and some other people specifically at that panel was kind of my light bulb moment where I was like, I love talking to people. I love hearing people's stories. That is something that's always been interesting to me. And I love sharing people's stories. And so that's kind of how this all started. So a long story short, thank you for doing that and in turn helping be a portion of inspiring me to have the podcast be what it's about. And then now you're here and it's just kind of a full circle moment and I love it.
Right. I love that this community is so great that we have this story, and you have this story, and you like had your light bulb moment to be able to do this for everyone.
Yeah, yeah, it was really cool and like I don't know. I just have loved getting to know everybody and it's been better than I could have like thought. So, but yeah,
I
so
did
thank you.
selfishly record myself asking that question and the answers that I got. If you ever want it, I'll send it to you.
Oh, I would
If you
love
ever
that.
want to like pick quotes out of it or anything.
Yes, I would love
Yeah.
I would love that so much because it was so good
Hmm.
and I don't know, the whole I just feel like everybody was crying by the end of that panel because it was
Right?
so good.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was sharing kind of about like their mental health journey, like several people, and how different characters had really helped them either through life or even explain that to like people in their family or different things like that. So it was really powerful, and it was a really, really neat and just really cool experience. And I'm so glad I got to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Laura, how did you get into Star Wars?
I mean, probably because my mom was so into Star Wars. So we had watched episodes like 4, 5, and 6 as young kids. And then episode 1 came out, and I think like a lot of people, maybe I was a little bit underwhelmed. But it just set up like the excitement for episodes 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And I think at the time my mom had thought that Anakin like turns into Vader at the end of 2. And so we're watching it and that like doesn't happen. We're like, we have to wait longer to like see this transformation. And then I think the only book I have read is episode 2, but that was after the first time I saw the movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I haven't. So actually for Clone Wars, I had been babysitting for a boy who's maybe like 12, 13-ish at the time. He was really into Clone Wars. And so I watched like a handful of episodes like 8 years ago. And I don't know, I think just like getting now to trying to get my kids into it. They're 6 and almost 3. We have like a couple of Star Wars books, like board books, but I think it's just like looking forward to getting to share like the Star Wars kind of world with them as they grow up. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's so generational, and I think again, not to talk about that panel again, but that was something that really just hit me in the face was seeing people talk about, I watched this when I was a kid, now I have kids, and now they're here with me, and they love it, and it means it's just as important to them, even though it might mean something different to them because they might find different things that they love about it. It was just, it was cool to in real time see the generational effect that Star Wars has on people and how it really has gone that way, and how, I don't know, it's so interesting when like I know from like watching interviews and reading interviews of George, you know, the generational aspect was like a huge component of what he wanted to do. And he really wanted to be able to share myth through storytelling and doing it in a way that was modern and easily accessible for like the regular viewer or even kids. And so he had all these themes and these ideas that he wanted to incorporate into it through, you know, myth, and obviously psychology plays a huge part of that. But he wanted to do it in a way where people were interested in it, and it was like easy. And I love how he phrases it, because you're like, oh, George, are you saying like kids and people are stupid and you have to like dumb it down? You know, he's like modern and accessible, you know, like it's such a smart way to like say, I wanted to make this cool thing, but like have all this meaning behind it that people would be able to find, and how stories are generational and they're told, and how, you know, different things that are important to us in our culture or our belief systems or different things, how that's told from, you know, generation to generation. And so to see Star Wars become that, like what he was looking at that kind of inspired what he did, is really neat, and I think such a cool legacy, because not everybody gets that. So that's so cool.
I was reading a little bit about all of that jazz today, kind of in preparation, and I don't know that I personally realized that he had done so many like consultations with psychiatrists and other people to make sure that kids would get and understand like the meaning behind the movies that he was putting out, which I very much appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, I know he did it. I know specifically for Empire too, I believe, for finding out that Darth Vader is Luke's father and like how that would be received by kids and how that would go over. And that's just so interesting to have that kind of foresight to ask different people different things, because I love George Lucas. He's amazing. He's super creative, but the man does have an ego. and I don't mean that in like a negative way, but like he is very confident in his skills and what he can do. And there's always, I mean, look at what he's done with that, and I think that's so incredible. But also, sometimes that can affect you to where you don't want help or you don't want like other people helping you with things. And so when he is always like, well, I have a team, or I have these different people, or these people did amazing effects, or the costumes, even though he definitely still had like a say and, his opinion on different things, it's still asking people for other opinions is like, that doesn't always happen with people that are over things like that. So it's just, that is, really neat that he kind of thought about that and had the foresight to include that. And I think that might even be his influence from Joseph Campbell too, who is a writer and has had some heavy influences from psychology. And so I think that's another interesting thing with Star Wars is mentors and having different people that help guide you. And, I was thinking about it because I was like, well, Star Wars doesn't really have like specific instances where it's like us going to therapy or something like that. But if you look at these mentors that they have and what they're teaching him, it's can be very similar skills and tools and different things like in the Star Wars universe that if there was a Star Wars therapist, would probably be saying some of the same things, which I find interesting too. So it's I don't know, it's a fantastic world, obviously, that we all still love as adults. And I think that speaks to it too, which is really cool.
I was going to add like the changes maybe that happened over generations, that like Rey had Leia mentoring her.
Yeah.
And there are more like female friendships and strong female characters in like episode 7 through 9. And I'm like, Leia couldn't have had a friend. She couldn't have had a woman mentor, a woman to guide her. So I mean, maybe there were some people consulting with George Lucas and saying, girls have friends and we have people that teach us how to do things, and they're not always men. And
yeah. And I think they go into more of that a little bit more in some of like the books and different things. Cause like, she was incredibly close with her mother. And then also, Mon Mothma was a huge like part of her life. And then, Holdo, which we don't really get a lot of until the movies, but there is the Leia book, which is incredible. The Leia Princess of Alderaan, and it's Claudia Gray, right, that writes it, I think
so.
Yeah, and it's so good, and it really kind of shows some of like how when she was younger and she's growing up and she has like different things. And then I also like think of like the handmaidens too for like Padme.
I was about to say Padme, and all of her books show so much insight into her and her development and what a freaking girl boss she was. And I love them so much.
Yes, but it is nice to also see it on screen too, specifically like in the newer ones, because like even if it's kind of like here and there, like with the other things, like it is nice to get that like, I don't know, just like put out there. And I think about too, like in the 70s, like having like a lead character like Leia was groundbreaking for the time. And even though we might look at it now and be like, oh, different things, but like at the time, like that just a princess like that didn't need help, like that didn't happen in stuff like that, like I remember growing up my two favorite like princesses were Jasmine and Leia. And if you think about them, like they're the two like most independent, like I don't need a man, like I don't need anything, you know, like I've got this covered, like type thing. So, but yeah, I think that is very important that they put that in the movies and the new ones, and to see that friendship level, because I think in our society too, like women can definitely be very like pitted against each other, and made almost as like a competition, when it doesn't need to be, you know, especially if it's women that are doing like some of the same things. And it's like, you know, you can be friends and do like similar things and like still champion each other and be excited for each other and root each other forward. It doesn't have to be like either I do this or she does this or whatever. It doesn't have to be that kind of like mentality. So I think having that shown too is definitely like you were saying, really really important. So yeah.
I
That is
do
so cool.
appreciate how a lot of the books dive into, I mean, different people's viewpoints of what Star Wars would be. You
Yeah.
know, all the different writers have different styles, have different things that they like throw in. And I myself have like recently started reading through, and I kind of have been trying to do it on a timeline basis, but you know, learning more about Qui-Gon too has been like really incredible and cool because he, you know, very much, I feel like, calmed Obi-Wan down and maybe helped Obi-Wan deal with Anakin a little bit more, because I see a lot of similarities with like Qui-Gon and Anakin and Ahsoka.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely having like a calming force in your life, or balance, you know, the reminder that it's important to, while it's good to be passionate about something and it's good to you know, want to go do something or whatever, like to not do that. And that's another thing, you know, that I think, especially with the movies that George Lucas did, like he really wanted to focus on like the hero's journey, and then also like selfishness versus selflessness. And I think that, and that obviously has like been carried on into the other ones too. Like I'm not trying to say like he's the only one that did it and then the new ones don't have that, because that's not the case at all. But like that was a huge component of Star Wars, of, you know, what are you doing this for? What are your motives behind that? And is it even deeper? Is it conscious? Is it unconscious, you know, decisions? And it's really interesting. I don't know, like he's somebody that I think anybody would want to meet and talk to, but I would have so many questions, I think, like, especially about the psychology aspect of Star Wars. My dad is a therapist. And so like I kind of grew up with that background. And so I don't know if maybe that's what helped me kind of pick up on things, like even as a younger kid, because I was just kind of around that. But I've always been very interested in that. I don't know, like the balance and how there's different sides to us, and you kind of have to face that darkness or face that part of you to grow and move forward and become a better version of yourself. I don't know. I find that very interesting. So
I love the concept of balance, like you said, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm looking at my notes because, again, you know, I have to try to stay on track, and that's not easy for me and how my brain is to do. So we've talked about how he was definitely inspired by psychology, and how he was mentored by Joseph Campbell, who was in turn very influenced by Dr. Carl Jung. And so, or Jung, I always say it wrong. And you know, he had a lot of archetypes, and he had like 12 archetypes, I believe I think what he had. And you can kind of see that in different characters in Star Wars, which is very interesting to me. And then, you know, the concept of your ego, yourself, and your shadow. And I see a lot of, with your shadow, that kind of representing a little bit of like when people are in kind of more in the dark side of the force. I don't know. That's kind of what I've picked up on it. You guys are the experts. Have you thought about that, or kind of, I don't know, analyze that a little bit with Star Wars? And Laura, I'll let you go first answering that.
Sure. Honestly, I'm kind of the furthest away from like a more psychodynamic framework or orientation. So I'm very much like on the other end of the spectrum, like behavioral, and I'm more like an acceptance-based behavior therapist when I do therapy. But I was more thinking of like kind of like nature, nurture, and
definitely
genetics versus environment. So there's like Rey being worried that she has this propensity towards darkness, even before she really knew who maybe her parenting or like grandparent was. Just this fear that we are like tied to our past or our like family history, and that maybe there's less that we can do if we have this maybe risk for something or propensity or vulnerability for something. So it's kind of what I was thinking of. It's like Rey feels like she has this darkness, or if she has this power or strength, that it could be used for evil or bad.
Definitely. And I find that too interesting. I was watching some videos even last night with Joseph Campbell like speaking, and he was talking about kind of how like mythology can be framed, and how there is, in myth, there's a lot of time a dark cave, which we see in Star Wars, but there's a dark cave, and it's a dark abyss of unknown, right? And it's where you kind of can find yourself. And then what do you do with that? And so I think of that moment, like you're talking about, like all of them have kind of had that to an extent, but Luke specifically had a cave, and Rey kind of did too. And so when Rey falls down and sees that mirror image of just like herself going forward. And I think, like you're talking about, that is such a good representation of like, who am I? Where did I come from? What is inside of me? But the answer kind of is like, I don't know, like you can interpret that in so many different ways. I think that scene with her, I think with Luke, it's a little bit more cut and dry. His fear of Vader, and he cut the mask, it shows his face, and kind of that lesson of kind of don't become what you fear, in a sense. But with Rey's, it's really interesting. What do you think about that scene in it's in The Last Jedi that she's down there?
I feel like it's like the fear of like repeating the, I don't know, like the sins of your previous like family or your history, and also like what are you capable of, like if you go down this dark route, or if you don't like correct the potential bad things that you've seen other people do or engage in. I don't know, there's like the what am I capable of in terms of like horrible or terrible things. But also I wonder if there's like a bit of the strength there too. Like what if I like make use of all of these strengths or like potential, what could I be capable of? Like, is there a way that she could use those things for good? Because it's not just that she like falls down that hole or that tunnel. She like jumps into it. So I wonder too, that kind of reminds me of like anyone who has been through their like traumatic experiences, or they have they don't know their family, like their in foster care or something, or don't know their family history. It's like, what I want to find out everything I can about myself, so they can like dive into trying to find out everything they can.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I'm sure there's a fear there of what am I going to find out when I do this, and what does that mean for me? Does that mean that I, like you were saying, am I stuck to, almost like a generational cycle or generational curse, or like whatever, terminology you want to use. And I love how they use that and kind of show, like, not only could Ray find her own family and like her found family and the people that truly loved her and believed in her, but she could also decide what she wanted her destiny and her fate to be. And she could move forward in a better direction, which, I think it's hard, but like in talking with people this month, like through their stories and different things, talking about how, sometimes we do get stuck in depression or different things. And it's really hard to get out of that. But knowing that you can fight another day, or I'm going to try to get through today to try to keep going, you're still going in a direction that's positive. It might not be the full direction that you want to be, and it might take you a lot longer, but that's okay. And it's, I think in our society too, we focus a lot on, going from point A to point B, and not a lot about that in between place. And as long as you're on that journey, I think, and that's just like me from like my experience and how I've tried to learn to give myself more grace and more understanding about what I'm going through, is that, like, yes, I might not be all the way to point B from A, but I'm still moving in a direction. And I might go in a circle, or I might curve around this way, or, different things like that. But I'm still holding on to hope, and I'm still trying to go forward. And I think that's something that we see a lot in different characters in Star Wars, whether it's Obi-Wan, Rey, different people, Luke. They always choose, even in the hardest times, like they still choose to go forward. And I think that's very inspirational to see in a story. What do you think, Ashton?
Yeah. So I love that you talk about journey. I actually have a lovely tattoo that reminds me to enjoy my journey.
Yes.
Because a lot of times, it can be stressful. It cannot be great, but being able to make the best of what you have been given, and maintaining that positive attitude even when it's hard, I think is really important. In terms of like our inner shadow that we kind of been talking about, I think that you really see the difference with like the literal cave. So you have like Luke and Rey who have gone into their cave, who have faced their shadow, faced their darkness, their inner demons, and have maybe embraced them a little bit. Like, I'm not going to let them scare me anymore. This is part of who I am, and I accept that. But I choose to move this direction. Those very much kind of like mirror each other, and it really shows the difference in Anakin. He didn't have that cave. He didn't really face his inner darkness, in my personal opinion, and he fell to his inner darkness. I think Ahsoka being able to like leave the Jedi Council is what really kind of shows what Anakin could have done. Not really embracing Jedi, not really embracing Sith, but being their own person. Accepting the dark, accepting the light of everything.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like it's like he didn't really have anybody he could talk to. Like, he probably could have talked to Obi-Wan, but he might not have felt like he could talk to Obi-Wan, And so I always think about that. And I guess that's kind of like the nature versus nurture thing. Like, do you have someone that can nurture you? Or are you just in an environment that's like not nurturing, like, at all? And then what do you do with that? And I think that's one of the things Ahsoka found, is she decided, for myself and to be my best self, like, I wasn't supported. I was accused of something. I wasn't believed when I was telling the truth. My character did not mean anything, all these past things. And so she took the truths that were important to her and the values that made her who she was, that she learned from the Jedi, and she moved on. Like, she set a healthy boundary, which for her was like walking away, which like I am horrible with boundaries. Like, I'm so bad at that. And I think it's because like how I grew up, like I grew up where, and not necessarily it was from my parents, but just like the, like, oh, kitty cat. I love it.
Put her little paws on my back.
I love it. I just was like around people that you don't think about yourself. Like, you are so selfless that if you thought about anyone else, like, you're being like full of yourself, or you're going to be prideful, or that's a slippery slope and you're going to end up, making a mistake or doing something for you. I mean, forbid you do anything for yourself, but there wasn't really like a lot of accountability to have healthy boundaries with people, especially like adults or people in power. And so, I think that is such a powerful story for people to, especially kids, if they're watching, Clone Wars, to see Ahsoka be able to do what she did. Because I think a lot of people, there's a lot of fear in like, if I leave this, then I lose everything that I am as a person. And that's not the case. Like, you can still be who you are and keep your values and who you are and leave a bad situation. And I think that's like a really cool story that they put in there for her.
And having her stick to her decision too, like not really kind of, I mean, going back for help and talking with Anakin and stuff like that. I feel like, that era of Star Wars is just very different in terms of like war and what Jedi looked like compared to, Luke's time and Rey's time. But being able to like stick to her decision, stick to her guns, and this is who I am. Love me or hate me for it.
Yeah. So how do you guys, when you're working or helping people, or I mean, I don't know what that each looks like for you exactly with the work that you do, but when someone is faced with what seems to be an impossible decision in their life, how is the best way to like guide someone through that? And whoever, I guess, wants to go first can go first. I'm working on the moderating aspect of this because I normally just have one person. So, Lourah, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, maybe I can back up a little and talk about like using Star Wars to explain like therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, first, I'm not actively doing therapy right now.
Right,
I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in Connecticut, but I'm 100% a clinical researcher. So I'm an assistant professor at UMass Chan Medical School in Massachusetts. Anything I say is not reflective of UMass, or I also have funding from the National Institute of Health. Anything I say isn't reflective of the National Institute of Health or the Department of Mental Health in Massachusetts, because I have funding from DMH as well. So just to put that out there.
And any question you don't feel comfortable answering, you absolutely do not have to answer.
No, I can answer them. I just have to preface by saying like, this is me talking and not like me as a faculty member.
Yes.
But so if we think about like cognitive behavioral therapy, so I'd say that we have like three basic parts of our personality. So our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and they're all interconnected. So if Anakin is feeling like the council is against him, or has the thought the council is against him, he's probably going to feel more angry and then maybe act in a way like lashing out at the other council members. But I'm like more of an acceptance-based behavior therapist. So I would say that it's actually not the content of his thoughts, but the relationship with his thoughts and feelings that's really like contributes to his downfall and is important. So, for example, when Anakin starts having nightmares, the definition of nightmares are that they're frightening, right? So if he's having these nightmares that he is going to lose Padme, and he gets really scared, he's kind of denying that basic human emotion of like fear of loss. And then he even says like Jedi don't have nightmares. So he's not having like that acceptance that Ashton mentioned. So he's trying to like kind of bury maybe those natural feelings and the natural thoughts that comes along with like having an important person in your life, which again is like a basic part of being a human being is connection. So it's when we have like a secondary thought or a secondary feeling, it's basically a judgment about these natural thoughts and feelings that we have that really contributes to suffering. So it makes sense that we would be afraid if we have a nightmare. It makes sense we would be afraid if we're worried about losing somebody close to us. And it's when we start acting in a way that tries to either like push those thoughts or emotions down and try and deny them or like pretend that they're not there, or when we're judging them. So even by saying like Jedi don't have nightmares, Anakin's like judging his natural human experience of having feelings and having fears. So that's a way that I can try to explain like what is acceptance-based therapy to people, especially like when I was doing clinical work, I was more working with kids, teenagers, and young adults. So especially people I think can resonate with understanding like what are our relationships between our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors with Star Wars. I'm going to check my notes to see. I feel like I had more like thoughts on that, but
you're good. You're good. No, I think that's great information too. And I think it is important to kind of know like, and again, it might just be how I was brought up with a dad that's a therapist, but like I'm somebody that always thinks about why someone does what they do, instead of just getting angry or reactive. Like I say that, but I think it's harder like in our closer relationships because like we know people a lot better, but like in like the general like realm of people, like, you know, if I see somebody comment something online or different things, like I can tend to have an easier time to like kind of not overreact to it because I'm like, why did they say that? Or what made them feel that way? And I don't know. Like, again, I think that's probably just having a dad that's a therapist. But yeah, I think that's really important to think about for sure. So, and did you have anything else that you wanted to add to your
I think so. It's more just like this fear and this like not acceptance or judgment about natural human emotions and experience that really contributes to Anakin's downfall. And it's so different than, I mean, I think in episode 2 when he says like compassion is central to a Jedi's life, so they're encouraged to love. Maybe they weren't encouraged to have like these secret marriages. But if it's natural to like have connection and have compassion for others. So it's that like the judgment of the fear of loss. I even think too, like Padme being pregnant, it would be normal to worry about somebody who's pregnant. And then again, normal and natural to be worried that like other people would find out, and what would that do to them and their relationship?
Yeah.
And so it's all of those fears, and then the fear of judgment. I don't know what Obi-Wan would have done or said if he found out about their marriage before Anakin had already turned to the dark side. But like, would that have, you know, ruined Anakin's life? I don't know.
Yeah, in the back of my mind, I feel like he knew, but like to like no and kind of no, like think you know, it's like a completely different thing. Because like if you're like just assuming like I think I know this, but you don't ask about it, you don't like do anything about it, it's kind of like your responsibility to that situation is, you feel like it's non-existent, right? So like you don't have to do anything about it. But then I also think about like if Obi-Wan questioned it and everything like he went through personally, like why did you not say anything? Like, and that gets into a weird place too. It's like, where does the responsibility lie? Like, is it all on Anakin and his choices, or does it, rest a little bit on the people around him? It's like an interesting like topic for people
We could do a whole
to.
podcast show over that.
Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, really, Anakin, like his character is such an interesting, just a character development and story and just reflection of like real life, I think, for people. Like, okay, I don't mean like all the crazy stuff that he did, but I just mean like the things that people can worry about and think about, and how, like you're saying, how do you deal with these emotions? Because I think a lot of people are taught anger is wrong. Well, is anger wrong, or is it what you do with that anger? And so like if you're taught your entire life that an emotion is wrong, you're gonna try to hide that, and you're gonna just stuff it down until it's gonna come up eventually. And if you haven't been taught how to handle those emotions in a healthy way, even an emotion like love, it turns into possession. And that, there was an interview that I watched of George Lucas talking about that. Loving someone wasn't bad, but you shouldn't possess another human being. And when his fear turned into trying to save her, that turned him to power, and that turned him to, well, not only can I save her, but I can rule the galaxy, or different things. And it turned into what his intentions originally like never were, but he was never really taught how to handle those emotions. And I think in real life, a lot of us aren't either. So I think that's a very important aspect of Star Wars, and kind of a warning that it can have, that like this is what can happen. Like you can, and I've said this before, but I love this quote from the Ahsoka show. Even the best intentions can have the worst consequences. And I love when she says that, because I know so many situations of people where they're like, well, my parents meant the best, or they were trying their best, or different things, but harm still happened, or hurt or trauma still happened. And what do we do with that? And it's such an interesting thing, because and I love that Ahsoka says that, because it is so true. We can still have the best intentions, but we can still have bad consequences from those things. And I don't know, that's just like another good, I like to call them Star Wars nuggets of truth. And I feel like that's like another really good one. But yeah, I just love all this stuff. And I love that I'm getting to talk to you guys about it, because not everybody makes the connections, I think, to these type of things. And it's really fun. What other things do you guys use in either, teaching or working with people or research? Like what other Star Wars aspects, I guess, you apply to those things? And Ashton, do you want to answer that first?
I can go first. Just like to say also what I do. So I
Yes, thank
am
you,
kind
because
of,
I don't know all the things.
I am kind of in a unique situation. So I'm actually a crisis counselor for youth. So kids literally, newborns typically don't have this, but like 0 to 17, or once they turn 18, they're considered an adult, not mine anymore. But I have done like straight therapy straight out of school, but now I don't necessarily do like one-on-one therapy, but instead I do like short psychological evaluations with kids, and then work on like solutions on what can we do to help this going forward, and what kind of other resources can I give you to help work through this. So I'm with kids and families for a very short amount of time, like 3-ish hours, follow up the next day, and I'm kind of done, and lead them to like a therapist to help them through this. But I think, I work with kids and I work with families. So what you were talking about with feelings and having good intentions, I come across daily. A lot of parents during this time, like when kids, and let me, like, a crisis for a kid can be if they are suicidal, homicidal, having extreme like anger issues, or experiencing psychosis. So those are four of the typical kids that I see. Um, but kids in crisis almost send their parents into crisis too. They're like, well, what did I do wrong? I haven't done anything wrong. They get very defensive. And so it puts me into a position to remind them, like, you are doing the best you can as a parent. I am here to just help you with that. So what can I do to help you, to support you? And then, come together and just remind everyone too that every single person's feelings are valid, even if we don't understand why they feel a certain way. So we may not understand why our loved one wants to, trigger warning, kill themselves. But working together as a family, being open about our feelings, and like using language that is not like accusatory when talking about it, and taking accountability for your feelings and trying to help explain that can be really important. And so I love that you seem to have really grown up in a household, with a therapist dad that reminds you to think. I always try and remind myself when I see people acting a certain way, like, I don't know what they've gone through today. Like, I have no idea what their life has been like, and they may not have anyone to talk to. So, the person who's yelling at, the Walmart checkout lady because the milk ran up $1 more expensive or something, like, we don't know what that person's been through. Um, does it make their actions, you know, should they be acting the way they do, like, as a response? No, but like, what do we, what do we know? And to just be, caring and non-judgmental too. I have always tried to put my judgment to the side. Um, Straight after school, I actually ran a sex offender treatment group, which most people are like, I could never do that. Like, how do you do that? And then go and turn work with kids. Like, um, but everyone's a person. Everyone has their own story. Um, I mean, that with this podcast too, and everyone deserves help.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can forget that people are human, especially in an online space. And that's why I try to keep things away from, I don't know, just like people getting on their soapboxes about the fandom for any reason. Because, like, I just want people to remember that everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to feel valued and accepted to some extent. And so a lot of times I feel like a lot of people have a frustration or something that's going on in their life, and the easiest person to take it out on is a random person like online. And then if you feel like no one is accepting your opinion, like especially when it's as trivial as what movie you like, right? It's easy to go down a path where you turn into a very negative headspace and everyone is out against you, right? So everyone thinks, you're this, they call you a name, it devalues you as a person and what your opinion is. And so it almost turns into people into something that they didn't intended. And then on the other side, you have people that want people to feel like accepted, and they also mean well too. But then sometimes they can almost be like toxic positive. And if you don't like something, they almost like push you away too, because, oh no, you should like everything, And so it's like, none of that is as serious as what you guys deal with. But it's like, I think there's a lesson to be learned there, because like you're saying, people are people. And yes, in the realm of things like discussing a movie and different things like that is not as important, obviously, as the other like real life issues that people have going on. But I think it's better to remember that those real life issues might be going on and we don't know about it, or we don't see it, and that everybody does deserve a chance, and everybody does deserve to get help, and everybody does deserve to learn more about themselves, regardless of your past, regardless of your age, gender orientation, religious beliefs, like political beliefs. I think everybody, should be able to learn more about themselves, but it's finding people that are willing to do that, I think, can be the hard thing. So, if you were working with different people and, other people are like, why are you doing this? But it's like, they're willing to, at least they're willing to try something,
Right.
and not everybody, even some of the best people in society still are not willing to try to learn and grow and become better people. So I also just want to say thank you for like what you do and what you've done with that. Like, I know that from personal experience with a dad, that it takes a lot out on people to help people with their problems, especially when they are extremely dark. I don't know how else to describe it, but just very dark and hard and deep. And I don't think something that anybody should have to deal with every day, but you choose to do that anyway, and you choose to help people. And I know, Lourah, with your research and the things that you've done is similar. And yeah, like that's a hard topic to be learning, researching and trying to put more information out for people. That's not easy. And so thank you both for like, sorry I didn't say that in the beginning, but like seriously, like it's not an easy task. It's hard, and people get burnt out and they have to take a break, and it's very understandable. And I don't really think pretty much anybody in the mental health world that is dealing with those things on a day-to-day basis are honestly getting paid enough either. So thank you guys for like what you're doing, because it makes a big difference. And I know it takes a lot out of yourself to do it too. So
Thank you.
I know I didn't like fully answer your question about
oh, that's
how
okay.
Star
You can
Wars
now.
helps us. I think like for me in my everyday work now, like we talk a lot about coping skills. So like
Yeah.
what can we do to help you cope with whatever feeling it is that you're feeling? And a lot of times, especially for kids, the easiest thing for them to do to cope is to watch something that makes them happy, to listen to music, to read a book, to write stuff, to work on puzzles, like whatever that may be. So I always, try, and not every kid obviously likes Star Wars. I have had my handful of kids that do, and we like really bond on that. But just like the other day, I had a kid that loved Bluey, and I'm like, when we are like mad and feel like blowing up and punching people and hitting walls, let's sit down and watch 2 episodes of Bluey. Maybe we can print off Bluey coloring sheets, like whatever this is. But using whatever fandom, you know, kids like, because more times than not they like something, whether it's Star Wars, Disney, Bluey, Harry Potter, like there's something out there for everyone. And just, you know, being able to relate and connect, or, you know, if we have a kid that has having a hard time like understanding why they are feeling that way, like what these emotions mean,
Yeah.
using different characters, different episodes of, you know, different things to help explain that. And I know we talked about that a little bit earlier too with the panel that we talked about, like sometimes it's hard to use words. Words don't come easy all the time. And sometimes it's easier for us to just be like, hey, look, this episode of Clone Wars really explains, or Bad Batch, like really explains what I'm going through at the moment. Can we sit down and watch it together and talk about it?
Yeah. And it's powerful. It's a powerful tool, art and storytelling, and helping someone else understand an experience that you don't know how to say or have the words to say, or maybe even at the moment have the courage to say, but you can show somebody this and say, hey, this is me. This is what I have to deal with. And especially I think since it's like a visual like media too, I think that can be really helpful. I say that as someone, I'm definitely like a very visual like learner, and like I understand things that way a lot better. But I think that can be very impactful too. So yeah, so if anybody has something that they're struggling with, like you can, if you haven't even thought about it, you can turn around and show somebody something in Star Wars and say, hey, look at this. This is how I feel, or this is what I'm dealing with. So yeah, I think stories are powerful, and they can really do a lot of good too. What about you, Lourah?
I was going to say, sometimes I wish like things were as easy as some of the examples. So
Yes.
my research is focused on suicide prevention and recovery from alcohol and other drug use problems, mainly within adolescents and young adults. And so I'm thinking about the scene where Obi-Wan tells somebody, like, you don't want to sell me death sticks. He goes, I don't want to sell you death sticks. It's like, you want to go home and rethink your life. Wouldn't it be so easy if you just told somebody, like, it doesn't make sense for you to do this thing, or like, you don't want to do this. It's causing like you pain. It's causing people who really care about you pain as well, to like see you go through this. Go home and rethink your life. And that's it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And I think some of it just comes from, you know, like the underlying reasons why someone might be using substances, but also the fact that people use substances when they're bored. So you have to come up with like other fun things for them to do. And I do some community-based participatory work, which means like working directly with people affected by either suicidality or substance use problems, and making sure that the research that we're doing, the interventions that we're doing, are directly aligned with their like needs and wants. Otherwise, it's just researchers in a room coming up with things, and we're not really the best people to be driving the field forward without the people who are directly affected by the things that we're researching and the interventions we're creating. And the fear is that like if you stop using substances, like there's no more fun left. So it's like convincing people that there are fun things that you can do without using substances. And I think like recovery communities too have really embraced this. And so I follow, like if you follow any types of like recovery community organizations online, I won't necessarily name any, but they do things like have, I don't know, like summer like competition. So having like, what's like the other word for bago?
People call it cornhole, I think.
Oh yeah.
Cornhole, yeah.
Yeah.
Cornhole competitions, but not necessarily within like a beer garden.
Yeah.
and just like other community events and things, and it makes recovery fun, and it also makes recovery in connection with people. And I think that's what Star Wars really emphasizes. Like nobody in Star Wars does something just by themselves. They're all doing it like within the alliance, within like a community of people. And so like the opposite of addiction is not using, it's connection. The opposite of like suicidal thoughts are like purpose and meaning, and that tends to be in the context of community and with other people. So I think, yeah, definitely Star Wars like has those themes of like connection and community, and like being with other people. We're, you know, social beings. Our recovery and journey is with others, not alone.
Yeah. And I think if you even look to like at when some of our favorite characters are at their best, it's when they're with other people. Because, you know, they're challenged and they're accepted and they're, you know, just with their community. And I think that does make such a huge difference too, because, you know, if you isolate yourself or you feel isolated, I think of Anakin, you know, like, what do you turn to? Who do you turn to? You know, and I think that's very true with people in real life too. And another reason to try to be more understanding of people that have different struggles, because you don't, maybe you've never dealt with that in your life, or you've never really known someone who's dealt with that in your life. It's really easy to look at people and go, I'd never do that. No, not me. I'm good, you know, but until you're in that place or you really know somebody that you've been there for, like none of us are above anything. You know, and none of us are better than somebody else. We just maybe had a different environment, different community, different choices even made for us. And I think to give some understanding to people, because a lot of people, when they get into a certain place, a dark place, a bad place, a hurt place, they probably wouldn't actually choose that for themselves if they could. But, you know, a lot of times you're either at the end of your rope, or like you said, sometimes you're just, you know, bored and you don't have anything to do and something's fun, and it doesn't matter if it's maybe not as healthy or positive fun, like it's fills in that time or something. And so just be easier on people, because like you could be one situation away from something changing in your life that makes you realize, oh, okay, I understand. You know, so
I was thinking too, when you mentioned like Anakin, I was just watching episode 9 today, like a little bit of it. And when Rey has similar dreams that really scare her, and she is starting to tell that dream to Finn, and he's asking like, was it Kylo Ren who was on the throne? And she says, no, it was me. Like what, she had to be vulnerable. But then even when he kind of gave a like an alternative, I guess, or like made it like he wouldn't necessarily assume that she is wanting the throne, or like assume something maybe more negative about her, she still like corrected him. So like she's vulnerable twice. She's vulnerable like in sharing that she had these frightening dreams, and that it was about her like having this, you know, like propensity to desire power maybe. So it's just exactly what you're saying. It's like allowing other people to be vulnerable.
yeah.
And then there wasn't judgment along with it.
Yeah, because we can't assume to know someone's intentions and their heart and like the reason behind they do something. I'm horrible with time, and I am horrible with like remembering things, and I'm sure people are frustrated with me like all the time, but it's like the people that I feel like I can be myself around and that I trust, and I feel like I can come to them and say whatever, like I'm struggling with this or different things, are normally the people that haven't like judged me or assumed that this is why like something happened or whatever. And so it is always nice to feel like you have support. And then I think if someone, it's a delicate thing about how to approach someone if they're not making the best decisions for them. Um, and I have definitely been more afraid sometimes of losing a friendship over seeing someone harm themselves in whatever capacity, whether it's substance or mental health or struggles or different things. And I've regretted that. I've regretted not being honest like myself and being like, hey, I have always been here for you. And I don't come from a place of judgment. I come from a place of like, I love you. And I'm nervous about this situation. And like, how can I help you? Or, how can I be there for you or whatever that is. And I haven't done that in certain situations. And like, I regret it because it's like that risk of losing someone and them not being, when that you're their safe place, like you don't want to mess that up. But at the same time, you also don't want to like lose your friend,
Right.
and that's like a very interesting and hard place to be, I think sometimes.
I think a lot of times, like in friendships and just in life in general, like when we confront something and they're not ready to hear that confrontation, because we do come up from usually a care, like a place of like love and caring, like, hey, I'm concerned for you. I'm concerned for your well-being. Like, I love you. What can I do to help support you to like work through this? A lot of times we will lose those people for a little while until they're ready to
Yeah.
face their shadows, for tying it back to what we talked about earlier. And then sometimes they might come around and be like, hey, look, like, thank you so much for saying what you did, like you helped me. I'm sorry for distancing myself for a while, but it's what I needed to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And at least you can know, like, I did I did what I could, but that's like such a hard thing, I think, to do. But I also think it's important for that person to know that you love them unconditionally.
Mhm.
and, and that's important. I think we all want to be treated that way. And I don't know. I do, there's a lot of talk right now within like the Star Wars community about like a Star Wars what if. And like a lot of them are, what if Anakin didn't turn to the dark side? Or
Mhm.
what if Obi-Wan said something about Anakin's relationship to Padme? Or what if Ahsoka didn't leave and she stayed and helped Anakin? What would have happened? Um, and I think those are so interesting. I mean, I think all of us have had that question even in our own life. Like, what if this situation was different? Or what if I made this choice instead of this? And, it's fun to speculate, I think, in Star Wars. But when it comes to like the real world, I think that's like a scary place to be in and to dwell on, because you can't really change it. You are where you are. You can only like move forward. And it's fun to do in fandoms, but maybe not the best thing to do like, in
And
reality.
that's a big part too of like acceptance therapy. So I know we kind of talked about therapy styles a
Mhm.
little bit, but I very much like, we all use a little bit of a lot of different things to make our own therapy style.
Mhm.
So like, cognitive behavioral therapy, very successful using bits and pieces of that. I also very much lean towards like acceptance and commitment therapy. So like
Mhm.
accepting the things that we can't change, focusing on the things that we can change. And then also like solutions focus. So like, what can we do to help, and not focusing on, what if I would have made a different decision back then? Well, that's in the past. You've already made that decision. We need to look at like what's here and now and like going forward. Like, what can we do now? And that's a lot of times, dwelling in the past doesn't do a lot of good, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
And
you can
I
see
think
that
that's
with
like interesting to see like Luke deal with that.
Mhm.
Because I mean, even for him, like he made like all the right decisions pretty much with all of that. He still believed in his father. He found a third way. He helped him come back to the light, and defeat the Empire and all this stuff, and then start a new Jedi Order and all this. And then, he was afraid of the darkness, maybe that he saw in his nephew. And so, yes, it's good sometimes to like take a little bit of time and a little bit of a break from things, but nobody needs to go run into an island for forever.
Right. It's a little too much of a boundary.
Yeah. But yeah, I find it very interesting too, the different styles of therapy and how that can be helpful, and how some can be more helpful for different people. And I love how even in the world of like people being neurodivergent, that people are even finding like, hey, this needs to be maybe a little bit more practical, like not as much of how are you feeling, or different things like that. Like, like more practical steps of what you can do. And so it's just, I love that it seems to be such a field that is constantly like learning and growing and evolving and changing. And which, I mean, I guess you have to, if like, it's such a field that's like generally for helping other people. And so, if you can't learn more about people and do research and with those people and learn more about them, then it's like you're, you might not have as many tools in your bag that you could use to like help different people, because everybody's a little bit different. Even if you have a diagnosis and it's similar to somebody else, it doesn't mean it's going to present itself completely 100% the same. Or if you struggle with suicidal ideation, like something might trigger you that doesn't trigger somebody else. Or if you have an eating disorder, or different things like that, like it all is a little different. So there's a lot of things that when you are doing, if people are doing actual like one-on-one therapy, have to pull from a lot of different resources and research and different things like that to try to help people the best, because it's difficult. And if you are someone that maybe is thinking about like, hey, maybe I want to try therapy or going to see a doctor or different things like that, like it's okay if the first one you go to is not the right one for you. It's okay to keep trying to find the person that fits. Like, I mean, obviously you don't want someone that's going to tell you yes to everything, because that doesn't really help. I mean, you can talk to someone for hours about all your problems, but if you don't actually listen and apply the work, therapy's not going to do anything. Like, part of therapy, yes, is talking to someone, but the same amount, if not more, is you actually like doing the work and applying that to your life, which is a lot harder.
Right. You may have 1 hour a week with your therapist, and the rest of the time is you and your own life. Yeah.
Yes.
I can also share too some resources about how to find a therapist. So there's a national, like basically a search to help you find a therapist, or different forms of treatment like medications or residential treatment or other forms of treatment. It's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have call it the Treatment Navigator.
And I can link that too in all the show notes and stuff.
Nice. There's also NIAAA, which is the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. They have an alcohol treatment navigator as well. So they have 10 questions that they recommend asking yourself, and then asking like a different, either like a treatment provider or a facility, like, is this the right fit for you and what you need? And they also have a treatment locator There's one for medications for opioid use disorder as well. And then there are other types of like therapist finders. So for example, like dialectical behavior therapy, there's a DBT like finder or locator. There's one, the Association of Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies, if you're interested in cognitive behavioral therapy or like other acceptance-based approaches. Lots of therapists in ABCT use those approaches too. So those are some of the ones that we mentioned today. But yeah, I mean, there are ways to certainly find a therapist. And then like Jessica, you're mentioning, is this person the right fit for you? Can you, if it's not feeling like you're gelling 100%, can you give them some feedback to make your experience in therapy better suit your needs? And if not, it's okay to switch therapists, so that you have like what you need to do that work going forward. Because it does, even you can have all the skills that you want, but you need that relationship so you feel like you have the support to use those skills, apply them in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And doctors too, if you're looking for medication, like totally fine to not stick to the first person. I think a lot of us have probably stayed with, even just like, your regular general practice doctor. I mean, so many people have stayed with different people for too long. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad doctor. Doesn't mean that they're a bad therapist. Are there bad ones out there? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's in any field. But like, just because someone didn't work for you, it doesn't mean that like they might not work for somebody else,
And we say this in like many places. There's not a psychologist, or there's one psychologist for 100 miles, especially in rural areas. So it's definitely, coming from a position of privilege to say, try and find somebody else if that works for you.
Yeah.
But
and with that is hard, because there are a lot of places that like there isn't a lot, and I don't know what all resources for that there is online. I know there's a lot more for like therapists, but I know some people prefer in person and not on a screen. So that can be difficult to find, and it is a hard thing. And I think mental health, and unfortunately getting help for that, can be a very like privileged thing, because not everybody has, like you were saying, I think that's a great point to point out. Not everybody has access to that. And so that can be very difficult, and expensive, and hard to navigate. So I guess
psychology. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go right ahead. You're good.
Psychology Today is another good resource, and they definitely can help you like weed out different like insurances as well. So that's a barrier that I come across a lot. Is like, what insurance does it take? Because it's expensive. Mental health is expensive. You can also call 211 from your phone, and it'll connect you with like your local United Way. And a lot of times they'll have different like mental health resources that they can give you in your area, especially if you're in like a more rural area. I personally, so I'm in East Tennessee, and we do have a lot of those rural areas. A lot of what I do is telehealth, because it may take me 3 hours to get to you. And thankfully, especially since COVID, one thing we can thank them for is like the development of like telehealth and making it more accessible to people. Because before that, it still was really hard to find providers who would do telehealth. And I definitely would say it's a lot easier to, find those types of things these days. But yeah, that's definitely, definitely can be a struggle.
Sorry, this cat is wild.
I love it.
You know what else is wild? Not every county has 211. I thought 211 was funded by every county. So not every county has 211 free to call. But again, like if your county does not have 211, I'm assuming you're connected with maybe a neighboring county. Yeah. And if not, the like the National Treatment Navigators you're still able to put in your area code, and you can put in your insurance and things like that too to find something. No, it's so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. And then once you start getting into all of that and unpacking all of that and trying to figure out everything, it's a hard process.
Mm-hmm.
It's thankfully, which again, isn't, I don't think, available to everybody, and it can be very extensive. I didn't know, and it's weird because they don't tell you this, but there are I'm thinking of the word, but there's now the genetic testing that you can do for
Mm-hmm.
medication.
Yep.
And they don't really tell you this up front, but a lot of them, there's a lot of financial aid for that actually. And so if you call and say like, hey, I got my bill and it's this amount, like they'll either look something up or talk to you about it. And I know a lot of people have had to pay like nothing or maybe $10 or $80 or something like that instead of like the full amount. And I know I had it done even though I had already done years of trying like so many different medications. And even though like it wasn't like helpful for me like instantly like starting my journey, it did feel very validating when I was like, oh, everything that didn't work for me is on my list of either this isn't the best or do not take this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it did at least feel very validating in my journey that like I was going in the right direction, even though it took longer than if I had something like that at my disposal initially. So like if you have a provider that you can see that does offer that, if medication is something, within whatever you're going through that you're wanting to look into, that is extremely helpful. Because it's so hard finding that. It is such a process. It takes so long and you don't feel good and you have to get on and off of things and it's hard. It's a hard journey. And so any little things that come out that can help like make that like a quicker thing or a better thing. And if you have that resource, do it. And I do really wish people knew that like just because they say it's probably going to be this amount, like even if you don't have insurance or something, like most of those companies are offering like a financial aid as far as what you do have to pay after, if anything. So that is definitely something to look into if that is where your journey is leading you. So
I was thinking too. So, go ahead, Ashton.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I don't know, Ashton, if you ever recommend like technology assisted interventions or apps or chatbots or anything like that. But that's what I was thinking, like parallels with Star Wars too. So there's all the droids. So there are things you certainly need like the clones to do because humans are needed and they're creative and they adapt and things like that. And yet like C-3PO and R2-D2 are droids that have like so much more personality. So one of the interventions that I designed like in partnership and with feedback from emergency department experts, clinicians, and young adults with lived experience with ED visits for either suicide risk or alcohol use problems. We designed an avatar guided intervention to help young adults with like manage their suicidal thoughts and drinking problems. And so the droids and like I don't know, I guess mostly C-3PO and R2-D2 is like the closest connection I can find, or it's not a human being. They're not real human beings. Like the avatar speaks to the person and like tells them how to use different skills, why those skills might be helpful, and then practices with them either in vivo, so like in the moment practices that skill, or an imaginal exercise where it kind of like you just like think about using that skill in your day-to-day life. And so the parallel is like it's really me and then the feedback from all of these different like key groups who inform what the avatar says. But the avatar is not, there's no one human being behind what the avatar says. It's just already pre-programmed. So I was thinking that's kind of like the droids, like they might have some personality. I'm sure there's like a friendship that happened between Anakin and R2-D2 and things like that. But like, I don't know. I still think there's maybe a place because we don't have enough clinicians to meet the need of everyone who needs mental health support. So could we use apps or like other forms of technology to help either while people are waiting, or for just people that don't have access or just aren't comfortable or not ready yet for traditional like office-based therapy or telehealth?
Yeah. And I've seen even there was a podcast I was listening to. I don't remember the name of it. I don't remember who developed it. But I do remember that there was even like a game that was developed for kids that had ADHD that they can play it. And it's like supposed to help with that. And then now it's starting to get, I think, FDA approved even for adults to use. And I find it so interesting because like even with social media, yes, there are dangers to it. There is negative that can come with it. It's the same thing with any kind of, I mean, AI is just a super advanced, well built code, right? But I mean, we wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't something that was coded for us to be able to do this. So, yes, is there things that we need to be careful with it? Absolutely. But there's also a lot of great things and great uses that can come out of technology and AI and the uses that it has, as long as we are smart and obviously like protect people and different things like that. But like, I don't know, it's like any new thing that comes out, everybody, I don't know, that'd be a whole nother topic, not Star Wars related, but like, I don't know. I think about this with like the brain and how it works in psychology and like just culture and like different things like that. But it's like every time something new is created and comes out, everyone's like afraid of it. You know, like the radio was bad and evil, and then TV was bad and evil, and then, you know, like everyone's always afraid of the newest thing that comes out. So
I think sometimes people are afraid, is this avatar going to replace human therapy? No, absolutely not. But again, we don't have enough people, like trained clinicians, to meet the demand. So could we give people something that is more than a self-help book? Like anyone could go down to a bookstore and buy a cognitive behavioral therapy self-help book, but it's not necessarily engaging, and it doesn't necessarily help you do those skills in the moment. So can we use something like an avatar to help us make those skills more engaging and teach those things to people, either while they're waiting for therapy or if they're not ready or they have so many other barriers that could be in place?
Yeah. It's funny too, because I think in a very recent interview with George Lucas, he was talking about how the discrimination, most of it that happened like in the Star Wars realm, was droids. And, you know, now with AI and stuff, and people are like, oh, I don't know what to think about it. You know, like it's interesting to see how like, I don't know, like how that was a thing and now this is like a thing in real life now. Just the parallels of different things are so, I don't know, just interesting. But yeah, those are all great resources and information, and I will definitely get all of that from you guys so that it can be I'm going to do an actual audio version of this, and then I'll update the description and different things in the YouTube so that it has more of the information so people can look at that if they watch this at a later time and kind of see if they need to use any of those tools or resources or that sort of thing. Is there anything else that you guys kind of wanted to go over or cover before any of our, I guess, closing thoughts?
I would just say, going back to like therapy and how it's totally like cool if you don't mesh with your therapist to find a new one. Also, things don't change overnight. So, like, just as a reminder, if you start medication, if you start therapy, it takes time
Yes.
for everything to work. I definitely, like, people who are starting medication for the first time, always recommend keeping like a mood journal to see if it actually adversely like reacts, because it can make things worse instead of getting better. And that, you know, unfortunately, we see that a lot. In that genetic testing, I recommend that for so many kids. because it does a lot of times, either make thoughts worse, like, or has something else like develop. But get therapy time too. Your first couple of sessions are always going to be kind of building rapport, getting to know your therapist getting to know you before you really start to dive into like help.
Yes.
So be patient, and it's not we don't have magic wands. So do the work and be patient, stick with it, and positives should come from there for sure.
Yes, it definitely does take time. Yes. And when I say that, I mean like in my situation, going to somebody for years and realizing this is, I don't mean just like seeing somebody once and being like, I mean, I don't know, maybe that could happen too. But yes, definitely give it time and know that nothing, I think we always tend to want like a quick fix, right? People want success quickly. They want to feel better quickly. They want friends quickly. They want money quickly, power quickly, different things like that. And nothing comes quickly. Nothing good, I feel like normally. I don't want to say ever because I mean, I try not to have like absolute statements for things, but normally, normally nothing good really comes quickly. It's through the journey and through learning in the process and kind of even the struggle and the hardships and facing that, like in Star Wars, the darkness, the dark side, whatever you want to call it, and learning how to move forward in the best and healthiest way with people alongside of you that can help you in your community keep going and to live the best life that you can, hopefully, because that's what everybody hopes, I think, for people to be able to do.
I was just thinking, like, if Anakin had come into your office and like was like approaching you as a therapist and said, I'm having these nightmares, my pregnant wife is going to die, like, what do I do? And we have to take like an intake appointment. We have them do a whole bunch of like screening measures, give them a diagnosis and say, okay, I know you're really suffering. And let's do all this paperwork and I'm going to like interview you about it first. So I recognize that people may have that experience. And part of why we have to do those intake appointments is because we have to understand like what's going on. So a therapist can't help you know where to go until we understand more about like the context, like you and your history, what could be contributing, and we create a case formulation. So understanding what are the potential like contributing factors, and how can we intervene and change things for you, and change things with you. So
It takes time.
Try to have compassion,
yeah. Yes, it takes so much time to work through things. And then it's like, oh, wait, I have another layer. Because, like, there's your family of origin and all of that. Like, there's so much that goes into it that when you're working through things. And yeah, I've seen like there was a guy, you were talking about Anakin, but I think he's like a psychologist. I don't know who it is or anything, but it was like, if these different characters were your patients, like what would you diagnose them with? And I didn't watch the whole thing, but I was like, that's interesting, that sort of thing. But then also, I think it'd be kind of hard for people to do that for some of the Star Wars characters because there's so much content outside of just the movies that I feel like you'd have to kind of really, really delve into to kind of understand like their psyche and their situations and their family dynamic and there's just so much that I don't know if you could really do that just from like watching the movies, but I don't know.
Sure. The books add so much.
Yeah, and the shows too. They're so good. I know, Laura, you said you haven't watched Ahsoka yet. I don't think, but it is
just like bits and pieces.
So good.
No, I watched Clone Wars, which I think is different. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there's like a live action with Rosario Dawson playing her. And it's kind of like in the same time as The Mandalorian and all of those things, because I know they're trying to get to like a movie, I guess, that kind of combines all of they're calling it kind of like the Filoni verse, I guess. But I mean, Jon Favreau's doing a lot of it too. So, but yeah, I know some people hated it. Some people did not like it. Totally fine if you didn't like it. Ahsoka is probably my favorite character right now, because that changes for I feel like what I need in life, and Ahsoka is what I have needed as an adult. And so I loved it. I was really nervous. I tried to not have like any expectations, because I was like, I'm gonna be really sad if I don't like this. And it's like, one of my favorite characters. But I mean, I don't know. Dave Filoni, I think, did such a great job. I mean, it's his character. He came up with her. He can do whatever he wants. I mean, honestly, we don't own any of it. We don't own Star Wars or what they do with it. But I loved it. I loved the mysticalness of it. I loved, how it delves into the Force and the hero's journey, and her dealing with, honestly, PTSD, with her dealing with grief, and I don't know, like the thoughts of what if something was different, and having a lot of acceptance, self-acceptance. There's a lot of that goes into it too. And so yeah, I don't want to give anything away, because I think it's such an incredible series, especially like one of the episodes. I even have like a tattoo specifically from let's see, season 1, because there'll be more, but episode 5, which to me is some of the best Star Wars. And for me, I don't want to say like for everyone, because that is very subjective and everybody has favorite things, but it hit me in all the right places. And
it's one of my top favorite too.
Yeah, I love it. It's so good. And I love how Filoni even named some of the episodes, because you can tell that he was getting inspiration not only from like other stories and other like mythos and tales and the hero's journey, and just like Lucas. Lucas raised him, I feel like, but also he definitely went into a lot of the psychology influence that George had to. You see that carry over into Ahsoka, which is what I like to nerd out on. I know like some people really like to nerd out on like the lightsaber battles, and I love that too. And I love the music, I love the cinematography, all of that kind of stuff. But the deeper meanings has always been like my favorite little things. So that's kind of my like nerdy part, and it's fine. But you'll have to watch it at some point. It's very good. I enjoyed it. So, and it's okay if you don't, because not everybody does. That's fine. There's a little bit to go around for everybody, I think, in Star Wars. So it doesn't make you less of a person, better of a person, a better fan, less of a fan, depending on what you like.
Exactly.
Because that can be said. And I go back to, I don't know why this person is saying this. Like, clearly they have something else going on in their life. And that's how I try to look at it. It's just, it is what it is. And we can only do the best that we can with that. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure, and I have been looking to see if there has been any comments or questions, and I probably did not do the best with saying like if people wanted to put any comments or any questions that they could. Again, this is very new to me, so I'm very much learning as I go. I am just proud of myself for linking this to actually go and be live on YouTube, and that it's working. So that is one of my takeaways, is that I was able to figure that out, so I can figure out the next thing.
Right. It was a step in the right direction.
Yes.
Well, Can I just say thank you, Jessica, because I think you're helping destigmatize mental health problems, destigmatize therapy and thinking about therapy, approaching therapy, thinking if medication is right for people. And as much as, we have national organizations and resources and local resources that try to do that too, it also is about meeting people where they are and where their interests are. And we have, commercials for medications, but we don't necessarily have commercials for other mental health resources and for therapy all the time. And so I think it's really important to do things like this and just have, in a compassionate way, tell people about, the resources that are out there. So thank you for this.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's always been important to me because I know it's what I needed when I was in a really hard place. And so, yeah, thanks. Can you tell that like any kind of positive affirmation is like weird for me? So thank you for that. I don't know. I just really don't want people to feel alone, I guess. And so that's why it's important for me to talk about it. So, yeah, thank you. But
we love the Star Wars universe.
Yes.
For all the things that it's brought us, people, it's brought us podcasts.
Yeah,
stories.
it's brought so much, and I think people tend to focus on negative things a lot, and that is very easy for us in our culture because that is what gets clicks, that's what gets likes, that's what gets money. That's what fuels a lot of things. But while it is good to analyze things and it is good to have healthy and respectful criticism, and it is good to have, I think, healthy debates and discussions about things because not everybody is going to agree with everyone. That's never going to happen because we all even just have a different, I don't mean bias in like a negative way, but we all look at the world differently because of like how we grew up and the situations we're in and who we're around. And so everything's going to be different. We're going to have different likes and dislikes. And I think the important thing is instead of focusing on that dislike versus like, I think it should be more of a focus on how do we learn how to, in a healthy way, communicate that with each other and have like a good discussion around those things instead of it being so focused on one way or the other. So I don't know. I hope that, Star Wars is so special to me and it's so special to so many people of all different ages. And I hope that we can learn to come together and just love it for what it's done for us and that sort of thing. And that's important. So that's what I hope.
I think too, when we think like, what if like, Obi-Wan had helped Anakin in a different way, or like, what if this happened, or what if this? I feel like Ashton is doing that. Like, what if, like that situation, like, what if this kid got help during this crisis? Ashton is that help. And I don't know if you ever feel like, I'm with this, family for this brief period of time, like through this crisis. 100% you are like saving kids' lives.
Yeah.
Don't make me cry.
Well, listen, I know that people that are doing research, because that face is not seen very much. People that are, and you're a professor as well, correct? Like
I'm faculty, so I don't necessarily teach like courses, but I mentor.
Yeah, but that's still so important because that's part of that that next generation that is seen as important in Star Wars too. You're learning and researching and finding new ways for people who are like on the ground to implement, whether they see them for a short period of time or long periods of time. And all of those little things are so important. And I think sometimes in any area of a field, sometimes the most forefront, someone that you see more often gets a lot of the thanks or the recognition or different things like that. And most people are like, that's fine. I'm not looking for recognition. I'm not looking for, fame or thanks even, or acknowledgement, but it is nice to have it. And even if we don't want it and it makes us uncomfortable, it is helpful and it is encouraging and it is something that helps anyone see that little spark of hope to keep going. Because especially when you're dealing with such hard and heavy and dark situations and topics and different things, to have that to hold on to is so important. Whether it's in your life personally or whether you are putting your life out there to help someone else that's going through that. So like I said earlier, what both of y'all are doing is so important. It's so needed. And I'm sure both of you are not thanked enough. And anyone else that's listening that is, I'll start first in the mental health field, that you are helping someone in any capacity with that. And you feel like it is a very thankless sometimes occupation, and you're tired and you're worn out. Like, thank you. You are saving lives and you are making a difference. And he would cry if he heard me say this. I remember as a kid being at the clinic that my dad worked at, and I worked there in high school. And I remember a lady coming up to me. I'll never forget this. And she said, "You're so-and-so's daughter?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for your dad. Your dad changed my life." I'll never forget that because my dad is one of the sweetest people and kind and empathetic people, and that is seen as such a weakness in our society, especially in men. And I think he is one of the strongest people that I know. And for everything that he's been through, to turn around and help people is just incredible. And so if you're out there, like, you are making a difference. You are helping people. You're helping save lives. You're helping make the world maybe in your little pocket. We've talked about that on this podcast. It seems daunting to try to change the world or make the world a better place. But even through Star Wars, we see it's starting in your community. It's starting with your family. It's starting for those loved ones around you. And you guys are doing that. And I know there's other people that are listening, and they might not be in the mental health field, but they might have a friend, or they might have even just helping someone that dropped something in the supermarket and you pick it up and you help them. Like, that can be a make or break it situation for somebody's day. Like, you have no idea what, and maybe you do have that idea. I don't know. But just, having the awareness that our actions do affect people, and I would rather affect them in a good way than in a bad way. And I'm not perfect. I still say mean things. I still am not kind, and I'm selfish and all of that. But, we're human. We're gonna make mistakes. And I think the important thing is to learn and grow. And if Star Wars helps you do that, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. But thank you guys so much for coming on here and talking about all of this, and sharing some about your experience and what you do for even your job. I mean, that's a very vulnerable thing to do, to talk about that with people. And I always ask like a fun question at the end. And so I'm trying to think. I think I know what I want to ask. So since this is mental health related and psychology related and about what you guys do on a day-to-day basis, if you were in the Star Wars universe, and out of all the characters that we know of as of now, and you had to pick one of them to be a mentor or a therapist or whatever, who would you pick and why? And if somebody's ready, they can go first. Or if not, we can wait a minute if y'all have a thought. And then I can pick somebody when y'all are ready. to go first?
I know exactly who I would
Okay,
pick.
Ashton, you go first. You're like, I know.
I would pick Qui-Gon because I think he is such a great representation of what a Jedi should be and isn't necessarily always. So like he still loves, he's caring, he's compassionate, he sticks up for the small guy. He's not willing or not afraid of speaking up for what he believes in, whether the Jedi Council agrees with that or not. Like and I think so many of the books honestly really dive into more of him and how like Obi-Wan wasn't excited that he was his Padawan. Like Qui-Gon didn't want to be on the Jedi Council. Like there's so much complexity to him. I really do. I think that's who I would pick.
I mean, I don't know anybody that doesn't like Qui-Gon Jinn. He's so great.
Right.
So great. What about you, Laura?
So I feel like I have who I was going to say and then who I now want to say instead. So I'm going to say you because I'm not going to follow directions.
That's okay. I am notorious in my friend like Star Wars group that like I knew even before I did this that I hate ranking things. Like it is like it makes me so uncomfortable, and I rank things for completely different reasons than other person. I'm a very like sentimental, nostalgia based like ranker, and so everyone's always like, if they can get my list of like Star Wars movies out of me, they're like, that is the weirdest ranking I've ever heard in my life. So it's fine if you want to pick two. That's fine.
Okay, so first Leia, because I feel like she's very strong within the Force, but not necessarily in a traditional like show me, pick me way. Like she doesn't have a lightsaber that I know of, or maybe she does in a storyline that I haven't heard her.
Yes, but it's not like we don't see it a lot in this stuff.
No,
Yeah.
So I just feel like she's wise and has that like strong grace, especially like in like the later films. But then who I was thinking after that, and maybe it's just because we're talking about like darkness and things, like Kylo Ren. Obviously.
I love it. You're like, how do I tap into my dark side? Oh, Kylo.
I just want him to say, you're nothing, you're nobody. Like, you're from Worcester, Massachusetts, but not to me. That's the only reason why. I just want him to look into my eyes and then to also read my thoughts and to say, like, I see you, I know you.
I love it. That's a great answer. That's fun. You're like, Kylo's mom can be like my mentor, and then no, I'm just kidding. Oh, so fun. I like asking the fun little questions because I never know honestly what people are gonna say. And this is kind of random, but I forgot to say it in the beginning. And I want to say it now. I am wearing the shirt from my friend. It says, "Things aren't Roger Roger," and it's got a little droid on it. And it's my friend Tiara, who came on the show, crafting on Illume. And she has these and hats too, but I'm not really a hat person. I'm more of a shirt person. And I like just got it in and I was like, this is the perfect shirt to wear for this because sometimes things are not okay or you're not okay. And that's okay.
I love that. I'm going to have to order one of those shirts.
Oh, I got like I think I got like the cropped one. It's not like too short, but I don't know. I like to wear things like this with like leggings and stuff if I go to yoga or I'm just like running errands and I'm short. So sometimes I'll do like a crop versus like a long tee. But she has like all different styles and she has a hat too. But yeah, it's really cute.
I love that.
It's a little droid. It's a little battle droid. And I think she did it more because she's like, these poor little battle droids. They just got taken out and slaughtered. And, they said Roger, Roger, but wasn't really Roger, Roger for those poor little droids. So Well, thank you guys so much for coming on my first live stream, which also happens to be, I did not plan this. The day that Star Wars came out in 77 initially was today. And also Return of the Jedi and Solo. So it's a good Star Wars day for us to be doing this. So I hope you guys have a great, wonderful rest of your evening. And thank you again. I'd love to have each of you on individually to go more into your personal Star Wars story and what makes it so important to you. I know we went over it a little bit, but not as much as we could. So thank you guys so much.
Sure. Thanks for having us.
Of course. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the night. And remember that you all are luminous beings and you're not this crude matter. May the Force be with you always.
May the